oftentimes people think because someone works at a digital company, they're automatically smart and that they automatically understand all the key components, and they may, right? But I would just say, make sure that for the incoming company, you get more than just one perspective about what's realistic and what your site's really going to do as part of the transition.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we look at what is changing in the industry and we take it to the front lines of those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest and Triangle Lawn. And with me is a glowing Dan Gordon, who just got back from a workout. If you're joining us on YouTube, which I would highly recommend that you do, we enjoy making facial expressions and maybe some obscene hand gestures. No, we don't. But Dan, would you like to say good morning? We are recording this in the morning. We have a great guest on today. At least that's what I'm going to say right now. We'll wait and see how I feel at the end of the episode. But introduce our guest and our sponsor and our topic. There's your checklist.
Yes. Okay. We have an outstanding guest. And let me introduce our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Coalmarch by WorkWave. To learn more about their digital marketing programs or any of their programs, visit them at coalmarch.com. And with that, we will talk about our topic, which is how to know when it's time to fire your marketing firm. And our guest is Frank Andolina, who runs Coalmarch, the digital marketing agency that, by the way, this episode is not about Coalmarch, but, we thought this would be a nice spin. So, Donnie, why don't you start in with, welcome, Frank.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan.
Frank. Yes.
Thank you, Donnie. Welcome back.
Before we get started, I just have to make one point. I'm a little nervous about this podcast. And the reason I'm a little nervous is because this is the first public forum that Frank and I have been a part of where I am not actually his boss anymore.
After the divorce.
So this is going to be a little different.
You guys are,
This is gonna be, and the other part of this is that, he's the bigger and better Donnie now. Like he runs the show now. So this should be pretty interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how things.
So the beauty is that Donnie is a client, right? Without
I am a client, and I will say that I'm a happy client. For now, it's like most things. It's always,
This is pretty full circle, Donnie, because when I met you, you were my client.
Yes,
so
this
here
is
we
true.
are again. You are.
Here we are again. Here we are again.
I was wondering if you were going to bring that up. That this is our first public forum as a divorced couple. Because I got to tell you, the last 2.5 months have been,
fantastic.
This has been, I forgot what it was like to live my life this way.
Wow.
I love it.
A rebirth, we'll call it.
Rebirth. Well, for all of our listeners out there, we were talking about this episode and we're super excited to do it. And with all the banter, I really am glad to have Frank on board. Frank has worked with me for many, many years. We've seen a lot of things together. This is one of those topics where I see a lot of people make mistakes. And typically the way it works is, and I'm just going to walk through what I see and then we're going to dive into these questions and points. But, there really is a point where you've reached a point in your relationship with your marketing firm, software, it doesn't matter, some vendor that you have, and then eventually you decide, well, this is not working anymore, and you move on. One of the things that I see a lot, especially when it comes to marketing, because there's a lot of sexiness that comes with marketing. It's going to be ways to improve your revenue stream, is that I'll see someone who doesn't have a lot of data. They don't really know their numbers extremely well. Then what'll happen is that something will change. They will have something that happens inside their office, or something will change with marketing. And then all of a sudden the relationship sours, and then they fire their marketing company. And by the way, this episode is not playing defense for marketing, nor is it playing offense. This is just things that I see. And so then they'll do a new website. They'll have all of this emotion and great. And then what happens is that eventually it'll happen again. And so ultimately what they end up doing is hopping, and they never get a real good strategy. They never get in a place where what they're doing has time to work because they don't really know their numbers. And so we thought it would be good to talk about, number one, there are definitely times when it's like, these folks aren't taking care of us and we got to move on. There's no doubt about that. But the other part I would say is that there's also times that you probably need to make sure that you fully understand the problem, because sometimes it's not your vendor. And I mean, this is not a Coalmarch thing. Could be any, you could apply this to anything, which, by the way, I'm super guilty of this. We've talked about this in several episodes past, where I went on the CRM tour, of which I'm still just having fun with, which is almost done. But anyway, so with that, Frank, let's get started. Where do you want to start? When should someone fire you, Frank? Maybe that's where we start.
Well, I have little to no experience in this, so I hear from other agencies.
Good.
And I hear from our brand new happy clients who have just been wronged by their previous agency. So this is all based off of that feedback.
Hey.
But I think one thing, and you sort of hit on this, Donnie, is why aren't you happy? Is it the marketing? Is the marketing actually the problem? Or is it coming from another part of your business that's really driving results the wrong way? So the first thing you need to do when deciding who am I going to fire is, where's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can narrow it down to, well, I think the marketing is actually the problem, then is it an internal problem? Am I not closing leads? Basically rule out all the things that could be what you're ultimately responsible for within your own business. And if you rule all that out, then you start looking at your agency. Obviously, I'm not saying this needs to be a drawn out process, but you really want to rule things out that are fully within your control first. And if you've ruled all that out, then it's this. So some of the biggest things that I have seen throughout my career, and what I've heard is your agency is not being proactive. That's a pretty consistent complaint that I've heard from other clients that don't work with Coalmarch, but I'm doing all the strategy. They're not bringing anything to me. I feel like I'm kind of running the show here. And what you really want is a company who is staying on top of everything and being proactive and making sure that they're bringing the ideas to you. So if they're not bringing the ideas to you, that's a pretty big red flag. That they're just in reactive mode.
That's exactly what you just took the words right out of my mouth. Is that a lot of times what that shows is that they're just reacting to, like, how do I keep this person happy versus what do I do to make this person successful? And I would 100% echo make sure that your office is straight. Oftentimes, if your marketing is working and you don't have stats, and let's just say you're not tracking what's happening in the office, like what's happening with conversion, you're not listening to calls, sometimes you could change 5 different companies and you're not going to fix the problem, because the problem is what's happening with, what's happening on the phone, what's happening in a text, what's happening on an email. And, it has nothing to do with the amount of marketing. One other thing, and I think we're going to talk about this a bit later, but I'll just bring it up now because I think it's a good point. The other one that I see, so problem number one is, hey, you don't know what's going on in the office. You don't necessarily have a marketing problem. You may have a conversion problem. You may have something that's going on internally, that's just not working. The second thing that I've seen a lot is when marketing cost in general, like the platform, is going up, and then, your marketing company gets blamed for that. That's a big one. And it's one that I saw a lot back when I was driving. It's, at the end of the day, your marketing company should be viewed as a company that knows what's going on and comes up with ideas, helps you develop a strategy. They don't necessarily change the platform, right? I mean, that's out of their control. And that would be on any media form, right? It's like going to an agent and saying, well, I really don't like the pricing from this TV station or that radio station. Well, they don't set those rates, right? You can negotiate a little bit, but, obviously with Google, we negotiate all the time, which means we don't. But the fact is that, if the platform becomes more and more expensive, that's not a function of what the agency's doing, unless of course they're bidding the wrong terms. Like if you see things that are completely irrelevant or things are not converting, that does have an effect on pricing. But vast majority, like I will tell you on the digital side, there have been dramatic increases.
Oh yeah.
Pricing.
It's no different than interest rates going up.
Yes.
Your interest rates go up, who do you blame?
Well, I think one of the things that I hear all the time, and from on our accounting side, it's, hey, what have you done for me this month? What's the new strategy? But there's no new strategy every month. There are innovations and things that you can take advantage, but they look to you for the holy grail, and it's just not there.
And I will tell you from my career being mainly on the agency side, when you've worked with a company, a client for so many years, and you've already made the big impact, you've already gotten all of that low-hanging fruit, and you've moved the needle significantly, then it's just a lot of 1% changes. And this is me speaking from the agency side. What else is there? Like, how can you really impress your clients to make them happy and generate these big sweeping, like solid results when you've already done the cleanup and there's no big new thing, and they're being promised the big new thing by the other sales teams from the other agencies. So that's just something to be on the lookout for, is what's being told to you when you're being sold.
So let's bring it back here. So when you're the one that has all the ideas and no one's bringing ideas to you, that's a pretty clear red flag that you got a rep or a company that is in reactive mode. What else? Like if I'm sitting back and I'm, obviously I'm paying more for sales, I'm not getting as many leads as I need, I'm not able to execute on the strategy that I want. What other things should I be looking for, or things that should be like, this may be time for me to really start shopping here?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, being clear on your goals. So number one, knowing what your goals are. What are your marketing goals? Have you been—
define that. How? So my marketing goals are, I want to grow to 10% or 15% this year. That's probably not, that's probably too general. How would you define, give me a goal?
So it's starting there. What's my growth goal? What's my profit goal? And then in order to achieve my growth goal, how many leads do I need to generate? Or how many sales do I need to generate? How many of those sales, how many of those leads need to come from digital? You've got your lead goal, and then you can create your cost per lead and cost per sale goal off of that. And I know you've covered that in the show in the past, but you need to set that first. And if your agency should really be driving that conversation, and if they're not, you need to bring it up. And then you need to be very clear on what that is. And then there needs to be a plan put in place, basically a business plan, marketing plan, in order to achieve those goals. If none of that is happening and you're just winging it, and your agency's just winging it, no one knows what's going on.
One point I want to make here, because I think this is really important, and and I'm going to try to explain this in a way that makes sense, but I view vendors like I do my team members, because truly they are part of my team. Meaning that if you treat a team member really poorly, you give them poor direction, you give them poor reporting accountabilities, like you set them up so that everything's ambiguous and gray, and you don't really put a ton of time into them, what's going to happen over time to that team member? You know what I mean? Like they're going to try to do things that they think you want. They're going to, the results aren't going to be very, very clear. And then who are you going to end up blaming? You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. When in reality, what's the real problem there? The real problem is leadership. And I'm going to give these guys props because I can. Whatever, it's our podcast. We do whatever we want. I really like the guys from Fox. If you meet Bryant and you meet Mike and watch how they lead their team, they are able to bring out the best in people. And that's just really good leadership. And so I kind of view that in the same of, when you're managing and talking to your vendors, a lot of times, if you're going to folks, you're not giving them clear direction, you're not giving them a clear plan, like this is what I'm looking for, and you're not really investing in the relationship. You don't show up to calls, You don't really check in. Like what you're doing as an owner and as a leader is you're setting it up to fail. You know what I mean? I mean, you absolutely are. And by the way, I'm not sitting here and, we're not going to get on some soapbox and I'm pointing it at all of our listeners and saying, well, if you got a bad vendor, it's all your fault. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though, is that you always start with like, am I super clear and am I treating these people like a real team member and are they responding or not? That's where we start. Because the fact of the matter is, if you take poor leadership to another team member, I mean, we've all talked, and Dan, I'm going to say this right now, and I guarantee you're going to remember or know who I'm talking about. We're in a couple of peer groups, and there's one particular peer member who turns over his staff every stinking year.
Yeah.
He's smiling.
So
what's
like
the
sneakers,
problem there?
You
just can't find good people, man. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's like sneakers, they wear out and you got to change them every year.
Yeah, you just exactly right. It's just bad people. That's the problem there. No, so point I'm making is that, and I didn't mean to jump ahead here on you, Frank, but I mean, it absolutely is. I think it's a key point to be made is that, going back to making sure your office is straight, making sure you have clear goals, making sure you understand the another important ingredient in that is really making sure that you treat your vendors as you would one of your team members, and that you give them all the tools that you possibly can to succeed. So
I will.
The one thing that I would tell you is in your communications with your vendors, and I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes you're not getting what you expect out of your vendors, and you really don't want to confront them and beat them up. So you start to lose interest. And that's why you don't show up for the meetings. And that's why you don't communicate. And then one day the whole thing just blows up and you say, that's it. So,
yep. And that's what you described, Dan. That's one of those red flags that on the agency side we look out for. What if our clients who have been engaged are no longer engaged? That's not usually a good sign.
Right.
It's not that they trust you and everything's going great. It's like, I'm moving on. I don't have time for these people. I got to go. I've heard that story, not from a Coalmarch client.
Yeah.
I do know.
Yeah. By the way, I know our listeners didn't sign up for this, but we're also doing marriage counseling as we speak right now too, just in case. That's a bonus, by the way. We're not going to charge for it today, but just when the communication breaks down, you know you got a problem. That's a big problem.
That's a conversation between the two of you.
That's right. Dan doesn't have that problem at all. No. Just talk to Carol.
Everything's honky-dory around me.
That's right.
Donnie, one thing to go back to though, and you mentioned this, and it's one of the first things I remember hearing from you about building a culture within a company is clarity. And if you as the client are not clear on your expectations with your marketing team, then you got to start there.
That's right.
And that goes back to goal setting and of course, if your expectations are out of whack with what you signed up for, that goes back to the sales process, but we don't need to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes it's really communication, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, if you're like, hey, I want to grow 100% and my budget is $50,000, that's an easy conversation to have up front. Hey, well, this is unrealistic and here's why, versus later on, it's like, well, if I put $10,000 into this, how come I don't have, 800 leads? Right. So, all right, so let's keep going. What else, Frank? What else when it's time to fire your marketing company?
Oh, when it's time to fire your marketing company. I think this one's tough because if you feel maybe at some point, they understood your business and maybe they don't anymore. Maybe it's from a change in strategy on their end. Maybe it's from a shift in account management. My other person understood me and understood what's going on. They don't get it anymore. They don't understand my strategy, or they don't understand my industry. They don't understand my business. Chances are there's a pretty big handoff problem there because anyone who's worked with an agency before knows that you're going to have a change in account management. That's just how the business operates. There's people who obviously leave their jobs. There's people who are promoted. You're not going to have the same rep from day one if you're a long-standing customer at an agency. But if at some point,
do me a favor, Frank, just repeat that, because we have the same issues. We have client managers in our accounting firm, and sometimes we'll switch them because people are moving up. We don't lose a lot of employees, but they get, we shuffle our clients around. And clients, some of them about lose their mind. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Are you guys going under? How come you switched me?
Yep.
Well, no, you're just.
Sure. Yeah. It's no different than, in the service industry, technicians, they're changing routes. I mean, things happen, good or for good or bad, but the handoff, the transition from, account manager 1 to account manager 2, that's the most critical piece in all this, because if you see things just fall apart completely, you lose trust in the new person that you're working with. It's clear that the person that you're working with was a superstar and they were probably promoted, and now I'm working with this person who's brand new. Those are things you've got to look out for. And this is the phase before you decide I need to go, because if you're not bringing that up, hey, I'm just not happy with my new rep, nothing will likely change unless you speak up. So it's really important for you to be very open and honest with either that new person or escalating it to their manager that this is not the same experience that I had with my first rep.
Well, and I just have to make this point because you said this early on. I want to make sure that people heard it, which is they have to understand the industry.
Yes.
For our listeners and really anyone that is around me, that was the genesis of Coalmarch. It absolutely was. The reason years ago I got into digital was because I was growing Triangle super fast. We were only using digital, and back in those days, it was, there's a big transition happening from Yellow Pages, if you can believe that, to digital. And it was a fairly new platform, and we were going to town. But I got so frustrated because what would happen is that we go to an agency. I'd have to teach them our business. I'd have to teach them that we're a service business. I'd have to teach them how our clients, meaning our customers, buy. They buy differently. When you think about pest control and you think about lawn care, those are two totally different sales. A pest control sale is 100% emotion and speed. This is something that's happening. It needs to happen like right now. And so it's a completely different strategy than lawn care. No one looks at a weed and shit hits the fan, right? No one's gonna make a phone call and be like, you got to be out here right now. So I would have to train that every time I made a move. And I was like, man, I can't be the only person that's struggling with this, which was the idea behind Coalmarch, right? Was to bring Coalmarch in and be like, okay, we're only going to focus on these two. We're going to have so much in-depth industry knowledge that the client doesn't have to do that. What they can talk about is strategy. They don't have to talk about this is how, they don't have to do all the education, because that takes months. It takes like 3 or 4 months, especially if someone's not familiar with that industry. And by the way, I'm not advocating, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just only making the point that this was the whole idea behind, years ago when I got involved in Coalmarch, was because I was so tired of teaching people, this is how people buy because I understand our customer, right? I'm not that smart of a guy, and anyone spending time with me, you will know that. But if there's one thing I know,
Confirmed.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Thank you for confirming that, validating me in the most positive
Donnie, I
way.
think you're great. Great client, great man. Thank you for paying your bill on time. You're doing great.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
but you're right, Donnie.
It's a key point.
You got to know. So it's funny when we started in the accounting, I would get, geez, you work with other pest control companies. Are you going to share my information with them? And I probably shouldn't be with you, but then you realize, or we've made it, that you want to have an expert in the industry with lots of clients who see lots of things. And it's
That's
really
right.
important.
100%.
So, from an agency perspective, you definitely need an industry specific.
And here's a little behind the scenes secret on when you're specialized in an industry, you can do things a lot more quickly than you could if you're building from scratch every time. I've worked that life where I have a home builder, I have a plumber, I have, you name it,
Right.
All these different industries, and you're building from scratch every time.
Yeah.
But if you've got a model that works for one pest company, chances are it's going to apply to others. And then the more of those pest and lawn companies that you have, you can see what works for certain, in certain regions of the country. This is a little bit of a sales pitch, but that's definitely one of the benefits of finding a company that specializes in your industry, regardless of who it is.
Well, you're spending a lot more time on strategy than on education, right? And
Yes.
that ultimately is just giving you more money. I mean, it's given, it allows you to be a lot further down the road than if you were to start. Because some people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this other agency that has no experience in the industry, and I think that's a great idea because they're going to have new ideas. Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, you might get lucky, but I know where I put my money. So, all right.
Yeah.
Another point here, Mr. Andolina. So they don't understand your industry. They don't have goals. They're not being proactive. What are some other things? Then it's time to be like, yeah, maybe it's time to move on.
Basic things. If you have to keep following up on things, if you don't have a recurring meeting, and that could be very much, just on you as much as it is on your marketing company, but make sure you have a recurring meeting. If you don't, you need to demand that at least monthly.
Yeah.
That way you're just making sure that you're keeping up, and definitely join that meeting. So you're up to speed on what's going on.
That's right. And that's something that drives me freaking crazy is having to follow up. Like, I don't mind telling someone this is what I'm looking for. I don't like telling them 3 or 4 times. Right. Yeah. What does that communicate? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's really, and to your point, I mean, Frank, I mean, if you're not putting any effort into the relationship, you're not putting any effort into, making sure that, these T's are getting, crossed and I's are getting dotted, that's obvious that those kinds of things are going to happen. But ultimately, if you're putting all the inputs in and it's not circling back, then I would definitely be like, look, either you're going to we're going to get on the same page of my expectations of, like, when I tell you something, then you need to but I use this in my own business for when it's time to can someone, meaning that if I put inputs in and you don't respond, well, you're not manageable. And if you're not manageable, then what are you doing on my team? Because you're not helping,
Right.
So,
yep.
All right. Dan, any thoughts to that?
No. I think, what are some of the things that you do before you make a move?
Yeah, when you finally decide I need to move on, it shouldn't be taken very lightly. It's a big change, especially if you've been with a company for a long time, and you said, for whatever reason, it's time to move on. No different than transitioning CRMs. Like, things could be rocky, but the biggest thing that I have seen, and we have built-in processes in order to mitigate the issues of going from old website to new website. But if the new company or the new marketing people that are building your new website don't know what they're doing, there's a pretty significant chance that your SEO will completely tank.
I would say a very high chance that that's what's going to happen. I mean, you have to be super careful with that.
Here's the question, right? So let's say your agency is not doing a good job and you're having issues with them, and you decide that, hey, it's time to go. And you said something very important. If the new agency doesn't know what they're doing, I'm assuming that you go to an agency that does know what they're doing. Why would you?
Dan, that is a great point. And I was thinking about this earlier this morning, because during your process of finding a new agency, these are the types of questions that you should be asking. What is your process for transitioning my current website, to your new website platform? They need to let you know that they have a process, and here's what we're doing in order to make sure that your SEO remains consistent throughout the website phase of the project, and once it's launched. Because I will tell you that we have monitoring set up for the very few clients who have left us over the years, and we can see when the new marketing agency has not transitioned their website properly, because all of their results fall off. And then
so for all of our listeners, if you were wondering if Frank is a creeper, that just got validated right there.
Totally.
He's totally
creeping. That's a little
scary. See it in my eyes.
Frank. Yeah, that's a little scary.
We're watching.
So, okay, So why is that? Because they don't take the pages that have some sort of domain authority and you reuse them, they just redo it. Why is that happening?
Yeah, it could be a host of different reasons, but the most common ones are content that was producing strong SEO results on the old site or is not transitioned to the new site for whatever reason. URL redirects are not set up properly, so sites
That's the big one.
Pages that ranked well, beforehand. So, kind of just fundamental SEO work that there's not a solid process in order for them to fulfill on that during their website project. So, in my younger years, I was burned by that a few times, and we figured it out and got processes together in order to maintain that. And it's a significant part of our website build is to ensure that we're capturing all the good things from the old website as we build new, so we don't lose that value. But like I said, it doesn't always happen.
Yep. The other thing I would say too is as part of that process is whenever you're talking with or like you're trying to okay, I'm going to be making a move, I'm doing some interviewing, make sure that you actually talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And what I mean by that is that we do it. I mean, when I say we, I'm no longer like working at Coalmarch, but there are salespeople and then there are marketers. There are salespeople and then there are technical people. There are salespeople. And then so my point here is just make sure that the perspective that you're getting. I mean, one of the funniest things I ever had happen, and I'm not going to mention the company, I'm not going to mention names, but I was talking with a sales guy one time and we were talking about moving my website. This was pre-Coalmarch. I'm like, well, where's all this content and stuff's going to go? He's like, dude, I don't know. Wherever the shit goes on the internet, man. That's just what it is.
Good answer.
he's like,
oh, that's a good answer.
Wherever shit goes on the internet. And I was like, huh, all righty.
So you said
the conversation took a turn after that. I'll just tell you that.
That's right. It just sits out there.
It just, So my point is that, just make sure that the information you're getting is from someone who actually understands what's going on other than just the sale process. So that's all. And I mean, and I know that's basic advice, but, oftentimes people think because someone works at a digital company, they're automatically smart and that they automatically understand all the key components, and they may, right? But I would just say, make sure that for the incoming company, you get more than just one perspective about what's realistic and what your site's really going to do as part of the transition. That's all.
Yep.
So.
Another thing with making that move is make sure that you have a solid understanding of how your analytics is configured, especially from a lead standpoint. How are you defining a lead with your analytics today, and how is that being tracked? Because what I have seen over the years is one agency defines a lead one way, and then as the customer goes to a different agency, that lead definition has changed. There's different criteria.
So give an example of, because this is one that you're absolutely right. Like, I find Google Analytics to be just so, it'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
Whatever story you want to tell yourself.
So,
well, hang on.
Right.
This goes back to what my statistics professor said in college. There are lies, there are damned lies, and then there's statistics. Day one, that's what he started the class with, and I was like, I'm going to like this guy. But yes, you're 100% correct. You can, but going back to your question, Dan, and I'm guessing that's to Frank here. So take it away.
Sure. And there's software that can be used. There are products that can be purchased in order for you to actually define a lead in your office and report that back to your analytics. But without that, you're essentially using the criteria that's available in Google Analytics. So something that would be common would be first-time callers, 60 seconds or greater. We consider that a lead, because that's something that anyone can set up.
That sounds fine, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So, and then here's my conversion rate based on that criteria. You might go to your next agency and they just are tracking every call as a lead. There's no requirements. all of a sudden your numbers are sky high, but your sales are where they were
So
before.
I have to play devil's advocate here just for a moment. And I'm going to put my operator hat on.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell our listeners how I do this. I don't trust any data from marketing firms, period, dot. I trust Donnie's data and I trust Donnie's discipline, meaning that I use our internal data and, we train our staff that, you don't just, someone calls in and says, what's the price of this? And they say $85 or $100, whatever. I don't think we sell anything for $85, but you know what I'm saying? Like, and then they hang up the phone and we miss it and we miss the lead. Does that happen? I can't say that it's never happened over the last year, but we do a lot of calling. We do a lot of call auditing. Our staff is very disciplined in tagging leads. And so I do that just for this exact reason, is because there's so many definitions of flying out of leads. What's the only definition that matters?
Sales.
My definition.
Yeah. I was going to say that is the closest that's tied to your own sales.
Correct. That's
right.
One.
Like
Yes.
There's nothing in between.
That's correct.
The goal is to mirror your analytics as closely to that as you possibly can, whether it's using technology that's available or using criteria to try to get your percentages lined up with what you're seeing in the office.
Right.
And there's different products out there that achieve different things, but that's it. You have to trust your own numbers.
Mm-hmm.
If your numbers that your marketing company are reporting are completely different, it's not because they're lying to you. It's not because they're making it up. It's because of how it's configured, and you need to have a conversation about that. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I think if that phone rings and there's an inquiry, and everybody wants to define it differently, but like Donnie, you said, how much for bees? $85. To me, that's a lead. You just didn't
100%.
You just didn't sell it right, or
no. And that's absolutely. And by the way, let me expand on that. Just make sure you're clear on what I mean. So if someone calls in and they say, hey, I want, like, for example, let's just say it was bees and it was out of our service area. That does get tagged as a lead. It just gets tagged as a lead that we can't service. Everything that comes in that we can potentially sell is a lead. And that's how we define it internally in our company. We say, look, if we can sell it, if someone calls me up and says, hey, how much is it for a batch of lumber? Okay, well, that's not a lead, right? I mean, ultimately, so that's our own, like, we have our own definition.
Right, but if somebody says, I have bees in Oklahoma, you're not in Oklahoma, that's a lead?
That's a lead, and it's a TPC, it's a TPC no service, because what that tells me, and the reason I need to log that is my marketing bringing me leads that I physically get that I can sell, right? I could bring you a ton of leads right now, and I'm not going to use this. Frank knows the example I'm going to use, and it's a little vulgar, so I'm not going to use it on the podcast. But I could do something like, something that's super, super popular and bring a ton of traffic to your website and bring a ton of calls, but it may not be anything that you can service. And so that's why, like, internally, our lead is if it's a service that we provide, period, dot, and someone calls an inquiry, inquires about it, of something that we could potentially sell, that is a lead. Make sense?
Yeah. What do you do with those leads that are outside your service area?
So leads that are outside our service area does not get counted in our conversion rate, but they do get counted in the overall, because now I can go back to a marketing company and say, look, yes, you met your lead goal. Unfortunately, 20% of your leads I can't service. So you need to tighten it up, right? It's good feedback that I can give to the marketing company.
Yeah. It could signal that something's not set up properly. You could be running ads outside your service area. And it's good feedback to give to your marketing company if you're seeing that, because then there's likely there's something wrong, or there's an explanation for that. And that goes back to the whole communication thing. Communicating back what's going on.
It does.
If something doesn't seem right,
good leadership.
That's interesting.
Yeah, good leadership is what it is, right? I mean, it's just sitting down and being like, and again, these are all making assumptions that you're pretty squared away in the office, you're pretty standardized in the office, you're pretty disciplined in the office, and you have systems in place that validate all of those things, and no one's perfect at this. And certainly if someone's listening to this and they think I'm perfect, I am. No, I'm kidding. No.
Believe me, nobody listening thinks
nobody's
perfect, but
gonna believe that.
Not even close.
No,
right?
but the point here
I just had to set you straight there. So.
Yes,
I do, client. Yeah.
So point is
Two
that
divorcees. Go ahead.
yes. So you have to have your office pretty tight, and you need to have systems in place that you can have that kind of discipline in place, because ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to a place where you take feelings out and you put data in. Data is what is the truth, and ultimately that's what you're trying to get to. And one of the most disappointing things to watch, I mean, we're having fun this episode and we're getting ready to wrap up. It's when to fire your marketing company. Really what we're saying is make sure you use data and not feelings to make decisions concerning marketing, because the fact of the matter is it's very easy to get caught up in the emotional side of things, good and bad. Everyone looks great on the first date, right? Or you've been with them 5 years and they're like, they suck. But the reality of it is when you look into data, they're actually pretty solid. It's making sure that you're in a place where you're actually using data to drive your decisions, not, poor leadership, not, well, they're great because this person, they're so confident. Yeah. I mean, it's just making sure that data is what's driving you, not emotion. So,
yep. And, everything we've said, in my opinion, is valid. But sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Are your phones ringing?
Yeah, 100%.
But just a simple things that you can pick up on. Were they ringing before and now they're not anymore? Like, before you're ready to make that move, you obviously want to bring these concerns up, but sometimes you just got to trust your instinct and make the move.
Well, I will tell you, Frank, I am shocked. You've had several points to just have so much fun with me. And I was nervous at the beginning of the podcast, but you have been very reserved. So, Dan, anything you want to add, take away, expand on, pontificate about before we finish out here with Mr. Frank?
No, I think that this has been terrific. Frank, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully I was able to get in between you, because I know that, no, there's no riff, but
there's nothing but love, man. Nothing but love.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me back to the podcast. I did wonder if there was a problem with finding guests that I had to come back so quickly, but I don't know.
He got it.
Oh gosh,
Figured it out.
Yep.
Nobody wants to come on.
That's right. I love it. Well, folks, you managed to do it again. You wasted 40 minutes with Dan and I, although you did not waste it because Frank was on. And I think we had a really good discussion about when to fire your marketing company, but more importantly, how to manage the relationship and how to get the most out of that. I think that's really the most important part. Just a reminder that all the resources and topics we talked about today are available on the podcast website, pnpindustryinsider.com. Just take a look under show notes. We will put a picture of Frank up there as well, because he is very pretty to look at. And as always, if you did enjoy this episode or any of our episodes, please give us a like on YouTube or Spotify, Apple, however it is that you listen to us. And with that, we're going to shut it down. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
See ya.
Bye now.